Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm Andy Bernstein, and I'm super happy to chat with my good friend and returning guest, Jim Gray, on this episode. Jim is a 12-time Emmy Award winner, a member of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and a recipient of the 2020 Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame's Kurt Gowdy Media Insight Award. I can't wait to be there at some point in 2021 when Jim accepts that award. Jim's new book is called Talking to Goats, The Moments You Remember and the Stories You Never Heard. It's an absolute must-read for any serious or casual sports fan. I truly, truly love this book. Jim has interviewed virtually every big name in the world of sports in his 40-plus year career. Truly every GOAT or greatest of all time personality with one recognizable name. He started off his career interviewing Ali. Then he has Brady, Kobe, Tiger, Tyson, Michael, Shaq, Dr. J, and countless others. What I really loved about the book and in our conversation on this episode are the backstories about the interviews and the personalities. Jim's personal experiences and observations about greatness, redemption, friendship, and integrity are terrific. Jim has been witness to countless historical events that transcended sports, such as the return of baseball after 9/11, the Atlanta Olympic bombing, the Malice in the Palace, Tyson biting Holyfield's ear, the Ben Johnson steroid scandal, and so many others. There's also a lot that surprised me in this book, too, such as how Richard Nixon was a huge sports fan. George Steinbrenner had a human and compassionate side. Jim's friendship with Jack Nicholson, who gave him the nickname Scratchy. A surprise phone call from Marlon Brando. And a game of backgammon with the legendary Lucille Ball. Jim and I also talked about our love for our dads and how they got us started in sports and how we gave back to our dads in sports later on in their lives. I'm really excited to bring this episode to all of you. Sit back and enjoy. And as always, I'll see you on the backside. So welcome, my good friend Jim Gray, to Legends of Sport podcast. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing great, Andy. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's so great to have you back on the podcast. You know, a lot has happened since season 1 when you were a guest. And I just have to congratulate you on the book, Talking to Goats. You have it behind you, but here it is. I got to tell you, man, I was so thoroughly entertained by this book. Every chapter had something in it that I didn't know about you. I didn't know about sports history. It was deep. It was funny. You got to take me through the process, Jim, of how this started. Okay, you know, you decide to do a book, then what?
Well, the good decision that I made a long time ago, since my first interview was with Muhammad Ali, you know, I tried to preserve it, you know, and unfortunately, a lot of them do get lost in 1-inch tapes and 3/4-inch tapes, and even back then on film. But some of them, you know, the good ones I had kept. So there was a documented record of a lot of them with the quotes, which you know, obviously some of them you never forget, and you don't forget the instances because they're that indelible in your mind.
Right.
And that's basically what all of these are. You know, the first interview with Tiger Woods, you know, that became a very famous Nike commercial. When I grow up, I want to win all the majors and beat all the pros. Obviously, you can remember everything when another man bites another man's ear off, and you're there doing the interview. So you know those are permanently stenciled into your mind. And you know, the Malice at the Palace and the decision, and you know, 10 years on the radio with Tom Brady and everything, all those Super Bowls and championships. So you know, retelling the stories that you have lived, that wasn't hard. Making sure that, you know, everybody's memory matches and everything is right, you know, that can take considerable amount of time. And Greg Bishop, who wrote the book with me from Sports Illustrated, did a great job because he organized tens of thousands of interviews and events and put it all together over these 43 years. And he's a great writer, and he turned out to be an incredible friend. And I'm really happy with everything that he did, and very proud of how he put it all together. And it's, you know, so the process, you know, writing a book, as you know, because you've done that. In fact, I think I interviewed you about your book down at the evening that you released it at and you had one of your big gallery settings displaying all of your art. But you know, it's look, you take photos for a living. That's why you're in the Hall of Fame, okay? And you've taken some of the greatest ever. So I've done interviews my whole life. Stedman Graham, who's a great friend who's written 12 books, tells me all the time, Jim Gray, they're paying you to talk, just keep talking. Well, over the course of time, he's also said, put all of these stories down on papers. And so he knows a lot and writes a lot about identity leadership. And he said, you just have to tell this story. So, he obviously knows a lot about books. He's written a lot. Obviously, the woman that he lives with, Oprah Winfrey, knows a lot about books. And they keep saying, there's a book here. So I listened to their advice, and that's what we have.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. And GOAT, of course, stands for greatest of all time, right? And the personalities that you've met, that you've interviewed over and over and over again, I mean, these are literally the greatest in sports, in history, not just like in our lifetime. You mentioned your first interview was with Muhammad Ali. You were an intern in Denver at this. I mean, that's you got to tell that story, because it's such a beginning of everything story. And I'd love to hear it again.
Well, that really opened and paved the whole way. And it was by total accident. I was an intern from the University of Colorado School of Journalism in my freshman year. Mm-hmm. And my internship ended, but they were converting from film to videotape, Andy. So all of the people who had been film editors took the buyout. The union guys, they just said they didn't want to learn a new craft. So a bunch of young people got hired. So this was a way for me to stay at the station after I had earned my school credit. So I was in my editing booth real early in the morning, editing the Broncos with Red Miller show. They were getting ready for the draft or whatever we were doing. And it was very early in the morning, 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And the assignment editor came running in, and she said, you know something about sports, don't you? And I said, yeah. And she said, you were the sports intern. I said, yeah. And she said, Muhammad Ali's 2.5 hours early at the airport. And I can't find anybody. Well, back then there was no cell phones. There was no beepers. If the guy didn't answer or the gal didn't answer their home phone at that hour, they couldn't find him. So whatever, all of the news anchors and sports people must have either been sleeping or eating breakfast or out of their homes, or, exercising. Who knows? So I'd never done an interview in my life. All right. So now I'm on my way out to Stapleton International Airport, the old airport in Denver. And I go and they tell me Muhammad Ali's coming up the escalator. I go and find him, and we go into this room. I sit down and I ask the first question. He says, you're doing this interview? And the whole entourage started to laugh. And I said, yeah. And, he said something about, you don't even shave. He looked at me like, and everybody started to laugh. Well, that wasn't a laugh at me. That laugh relaxed me. Because it was funny. Yeah. It was funny. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And I had no idea. So, I laughed, but it put me totally at ease. By the third or fourth question, he said to me, you sound like the local Howard Cosell. Andy, that was the greatest compliment I'd ever had in my life.
Unbelievable. Okay? What a way to start.
Gave me all that confidence. Ali gave me about 45 minutes. I took the tape back, went back to edit myself out. They weren't going to put me on television. So I was back in my edit booth, just getting it ready to give to the folks for ABC and the local news. And the head of the station walked in, a man named Roger Ogden, and he looked at it, and he knew me, but he didn't know me well. I was, an intern and a videotape editor. Watched the tape for an hour and a half, watched it twice. He was mesmerized, not with me, but with Ali. Ali just captivating. All right. So he said at the end of that, he said, Jim, you and this videotape, we're putting it on the air. It's barely adequate. So I tell everybody I've been barely adequate ever since.
Oh, what a auspicious beginning. That's so amazing. You talk about growing up in Denver and being a sports fan and bonding with your dad over sports and all that. And did you always know you wanted to be in sports, that you wanted to be in sports broadcasting specifically?
I don't want to say no, but it wasn't a goal. It wasn't anything that I thought about. I mean, I thought about sportscasters. I loved listening to Kurt Gowdy. We considered him a local guy because he was just from across the border, about 2 hours in Wyoming from Denver. Okay, so that was local. He was a Rocky Mountain guy, and he was the American sportsman, and he would do the Rose Bowl and the old AFL games, and he'd show up at the Final Four, and he was just pleasant, and everybody in our area was proud of Kurt Gowdy, even though he was a Wyomingian from Wyoming, and we're Coloradoans. We just considered that, and and you have to fly out of the Denver airport and all that. So he had a lot of publicity, and a man named Bob Martin did the Rockets, and then the Nuggets games and the Bronco games, and he was guy I'd listened to on sports talk radio, Bronco Talk, they called it. It was actually before one of the first sports talk shows, at least in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd watch Howard Cosell do Monday Night Football highlights, and I'd watch him do all the Ali interviews, and my dad and I would watch him do the fights. And so, I thought about how great these guys were, and I loved watching them, and I love sports, but I wasn't sitting here thinking, this should be a career of mine, or that I'd have the ability or the inclination to want to get into it. And then I applied for that internship and saw what it was like, and I got exposed to it a little bit. And so, and then when I got lucky to get hired, I then thought, perhaps I could make a career of this. Perhaps this is, something. I love sports.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't play sports. I was a tennis player in high school, and, decent tennis player, but not anywhere near the level you'd have to be to play professional or at a higher level. And so, I kind of thought, let me give this a try. And then the Ali thing, gave me the ability to take off. But the interesting thing is I was very lucky to be a videotape editor,
mm-hmm.
because not only did it let me into the station, it allowed me to learn so much about reporters and
Mm-hmm.
anchors, because you would edit them and their questions, and you would edit their interviews. So you'd hear good, you'd hear bad, you'd hear what needed to be taken out, and you could see that. And so, I started to process all of that. And then after the news every night, Andy, you had 4 sets in the old edit booth, one for each monitor to edit, the master and the raw tape. And then down below would be the air, what's on the air, and then would be the network, what's on the air locally. So I had 4 monitors. So after the news, Ted Koppel would come on with America Held Hostage for the hostages crisis in Iran. And Johnny Carson would be on the other monitor for the Tonight Show. And I started watching these guys, and they were two totally opposite fields, but they had 2 things, one thing really that they did in common. 2 things. They were both on at the same time. And then the other thing is they could listen, think, and react all in a blink of an eye. Okay?
Mm.
One in comedy and one in news. And I thought, wow. And I would stare at them. And then I'd think about how that compared to the people I was editing. And I said, if you can do this, which is very hard, they're 2 of the best people in the history of television.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do this, if you can simultaneously do that, listen, think, react, and spit it out, and be somewhat, able to verbalize that, could have a future. So I watched them. I watched them all those years that I was sitting in that edit booth, and it was such a big help. And that kind of crystallized for me how to do an interview, and how you could be cognizant and successful. And it was by using your ears, listening.
Well, you got to add in one more element to that, Jim, in your career is that you're doing it live. I mean, you are in the thick of a chaotic, most of the time, a very chaotic situation. If you're in a ring, or you're in a locker room, or you're on the court, or wherever you happen to be, and you got to have your wits about you. You got to be organized in your brain. You got to rely on all of your techs that are behind you, the cameraman, everybody in the booth. You and I are kind of similar that way in the way we work. Like, there's no do-overs in our job. You can't wait, let's do that one again. LeBron, go up for that dunk again, or whatever. That's not going to happen. So how did you get comfortable? I mean, you must have had some technique to just sort of get in the moment. Kobe always used to talk about just being in that moment and the whole zen of that. I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but
I never really had that. I've always been extremely aware.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Before you go on camera, you feel it. You know it. Okay. Am I going to be able to speak a word? It's not stage fright, but it's awareness. You're not nervous, but you're cognizant, and, your antenna are up.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You're talking usually to just a cameraman or woman. All right. So that's what I've tried to do, is think that I'm just talking to this individual, but that there are countless hundreds of thousands, millions upon millions of people who are receiving this, particularly if you're doing a bigger event, a Super Bowl or a World Series or an NBA Finals or All-Star games and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be very alert, because every word is analyzed and it's received by so many different factions. There's the players, there's the coaches, there's the organization, there's the media, there's the fans, there's the advertisers, there's the network executive. I mean, I can go through this whole confluence of this web, and it's very, there's the families. Okay. So, there are so many people who are receiving this. So you have to be very aware of each word that comes out of your mouth, because that reception is going to take different people in a different way.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So what's innocuous to me is hurtful to somebody else, or what's warm and fuzzy to me may be greeted differently by somebody else. So but I'm just saying you're aware, and then you just do your job. So it's not, I never thought of it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought about being the best that I could be for the people I work with. I never wanted to let, any of them down, whether it was the camera people I was with, Bob Costas or Ahmad or Marv or Bob or Dick Enberg, Jim Nance. You just want to be so that you're carrying your share of the load and not let any of them down. And then there's the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just trying to be naturally curious to satisfy what it is that I'm thinking, and hoping that that's what everybody at home would like to hear and think. Sometimes it didn't mesh and it matches, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I hear you, man. You touched on so many themes in your book, and we don't have time to talk about it. Maybe we can do a 10-part series, like The Last Dance. But one of the
there's 20 chapters, but I don't think there's 20 chapters of this. Talking to Goats is not The Last Dance.
Yeah, but I think that you're maybe selling yourself short, because the things that you touched on, Jim, like greatness and perfection, for example. Okay, I mean, I wrote all this stuff. I had like 9 pages here, but you talked about a quote that Kobe had. He said, "I understand and know that perfection can never be attained, but it sure is a hell of a lot of fun trying to get it." And then, what you said about Tom Brady, that sometimes a Hall of Fame career results from a few breaks. I mean, greatness has to be earned. Nobody's born great. Tom Brady and his pursuit of greatness, Michael Phelps, Gretzky, Mayweather, Tiger, all the guys that you talked about. What do you think is the common thread between all these guys and women that and not just athletes, but people in business, the Al Davises of the world that you've come across? What's the common thread?
Well, the common thread would be hard work, dedication, and a myopic vision to achieve that pursuit of excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Al Davis called it a commitment to excellence. Okay. And that's what the moniker of the franchise is. Just win, baby. Commitment to excellence and pride and joys. Just think how those three things, how brilliant they are, and how many years ago he said that, and how that lasts. Just win, baby. Well, what is Nike?
Mm-hmm.
What is Nike?
Yeah, just do it.
Just do it. Okay. Well, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
Just win, baby. Okay. Al was here before Nike.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, there is a commitment that these people have that they will only get to where they're going, and they're going to do it their way. And that's where they separate, because they each go about it much, much differently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were around Kobe Bryant, so let's just take common ground,
Mm-hmm.
because you know him inside and out, having done his book and having spent all this time with him. And we both still obviously grieve and mourn that horrible loss of him and Gigi and the others in the helicopter. But Kobe Bryant wanted to win, and that's all he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were in the way, and it didn't matter who was in the way, if you were an opponent, get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a teammate and you weren't going to cooperate, get out of the way.
Mm.
If you were the coach, and he hated Phil Jackson, this man despised Phil Jackson for a long time, and Phil treated him poorly, and I go through it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Phil writes about it in his book. This isn't a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of the way. And guess who won? Kobe won.
Yeah.
Kobe won. So that's kind of the common theme, is to get to that final place. And Kobe dedicated his whole life to trying to be the best basketball player ever. And he modeled his whole life after Michael Jordan, who's considered the greatest basketball player ever. Now we can argue about LeBron, and LeBron's still in it. So it's hard to have an argument that a guy's a GOAT when he hasn't totally retired. LeBron is in this sentence. And many people think that LeBron is the guy, okay, having won those 4 championships, 3 different teams, all the finals and so forth. But for the time being, he's still playing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So is Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom's kind of already set the standard. He's not chasing anybody. They're all chasing him, and he's still playing.
Yeah.
But the point is what it takes to get to that top step of the victory platform. Look at Michael Phelps.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Phelps dedicated his life, Andy, to staring at a black line underwater so that he could figure out how to hit the board by a fingernail before somebody else did. And it tormented him to the point of that great HBO documentary. And so perfection and excellence comes at a big, big price. A big, big price. Julius Erving said this to me many years ago, and it's in the book. It's in the Talking to Goats book. Do you know anybody who truly is at the top of their profession or is a big success that doesn't have one major quirk or flaw in their personality?
No, I mean, everybody's human, of course, right? Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you brought up Michael Phelps because, I actually have this written down, the personal price of constant pursuit of greatness and perfection. And you wrote in the book that perfection comes at a steep price, in regard to Phelps and his story. But the fact that you can dive into that with him and have this honest conversation, and he trusts you just like countless others trust you. I mean, trust can't be, I don't know if it can be measured. It has to be earned, and it has to be continually earned, right? I found that in my job. If I didn't have the trust of Magic and Pat Riley early in my career, never would have had that with Kobe and Shaq and Phil and then later on LeBron and all these other guys, right? So, these guys trust you, Jim. You're able to get into really deep stuff. And the question I have for you is it difficult sometimes to be too close in a personal way to these guys, right? Or the people you interview. And I go back to a conversation I had with the great Walter Yost, the Hall of Fame photographer, who said that he and Michael had this great, incredible personal relationship. But when Michael came on his set, like he would give Michael 5 minutes to chit chat and then cut him off and say, now we got to work. And I'm wondering if you were ever in that situation where, you knew you had a job to do, you had to work, and, whoever it is you're interviewing just wanted to make small talk or whatever. And you're like, no, we got to do this now.
Sometimes that's occurred, but a lot of these are live, Andy. So we have to get right to the point anyway. So we're in between a commercial maybe, or they stand around after, but usually that didn't occur in the live instances. You don't have that going on. And and you touched on an interesting thing, and I get asked it a lot, and I'm sure you're asked it a lot because you've been in the position. And how do you identify why somebody trusts you? How do you identify why somebody has a connection to you and is willing to allow you to have that relationship? Okay. And it's this: true friendship, a true relationship is reciprocal. They have to want it too. I can't just go decide I'm going to be friends with Jack Nicholson. He has to want that too, or Kobe Bryant, or Tom Brady, or whoever it is that you're dealing with, professionally or personally. Okay. They have to feel that reciprocity and want to have that occur. Okay. If somebody's always giving all the time, Andy, that can't work. It can't work at all because it creates resentment. And if somebody's always taking, that's never going to work because it creates a dependence. Okay. So then it's not real. If I'm dependent on you and I'm always taking from you, that's not a real relationship. It's a dependency. Okay? And so it loses its independent nature of the relationship. So to be trusted, to earn trust, you have to be worthy of that. And like Tom Brady, I always think this of Tom. Tom Brady trusts other people because he trusts himself. Okay? He's confident and he trusts himself. And guess what? If you step outside of that, you hang yourself. He doesn't cut you. He doesn't release you. He doesn't get rid of you. You do it to yourself. So if you step over the line with these folks into a place where you're, whatever it is, where you betray that confidence, no matter what it is, whether it's an issue that's private, whether it's a money issue, whatever it can be, where trust can be betrayed, you're going to do it to yourself. And Chuck Daly, who was my best friend, who you loved, and I know you knew very well, Chuck used to always say, "Don't worry about it, Jimmy. The bad weed themselves out."
Yeah, that's really true, Jim. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of things with you that as you're speaking, about your relationship with Mike Tyson, for example. You met him very young, and he trusted you from the beginning. And of course, you had to do a very difficult interview with him after he bit off Evander Holyfield's ear, and he did it. And you talk about how he always was there and he always kept his word. And I'm also thinking about the fact that at one moment he's threatening to kill you, and the next moment he's kissing you. It's like, and yet he inducted you into the Boxing Hall of Fame. I mean, you just think about relationships and the ebb and flow. It's amazing to me.
Did I bring Mike Tyson to the Basketball Hall of Fame to do it?
You absolutely need to do that, because I know I'll be like mesmerized, and he probably would know every statistic for basketball that he knew about you in boxing, knowing him.
He's unbelievably, he's extremely intelligent, and this roller coaster ride, even all the despicable acts and the heinous acts,
Yeah.
There's a brilliant, wonderful side to Mike Tyson, and I'm honored what he wrote on the back of the book, that we were a sensational duo.
Mm-hmm.
Also that I became his most trusted friend.
He said that. Yeah, I wrote that. He's your most trusted friend. I mean,
so I'm honored by that, and I don't condone his heinous acts, and I don't wash right over him when I'm with him. I tell him, you got to do better. That's despicable. And he's paid the price. Okay, yeah. He's taken his medicine. So, by the way, when he kissed me 45 seconds later after threatening to kill me, that was far more disturbing, Andy.
I bet. but it beats the alternative. You also talked about the Malice in the Palace, and I didn't know this about you, but I didn't know that that Meta World Peace Ron Artest at the time took you out at a game once, like literally like barreled into you. I don't know if he broke your nose, but he knocked you out, right?
He did.
And next thing you know, you got to interview him at the Malice in the Palace. I mean, I'm thinking I wrote this down, Jim, and you know this, but the viewers and listeners don't. I mean, just think about all the events that you were at that were also historical events away from sports, right? The 96 Olympics, the Atlanta bombing, right? We talked about the Tyson Holyfield ear biting, social justice issues that you covered with countless athletes. I mean, Hank Aaron comes to mind. You talk about it in the book. Malice in the Palace, Michael Jordan's first retirement, the whole Ben Johnson steroid controversy at the Olympics, right? And what I want to talk about, though, is the documentary you did about 9/11 called First Pitch. That was a 30 for 30, which is amazing. I watched it again because I had seen it once before. And I want to tie that into what just happened with what we just went through with the pandemic, with the stoppage of sports. I mean, all sports stopped after 9/11, and then all sports stopped March 11th this year, right? And how sports, I guess brought everybody back together. I mean, it gave us all something to hope for, I guess, after 9/11 as a country, and also with the pandemic. And, I went through that with the whole bubble situation, and there was some normalcy, even though it was the most, abnormal situation in history for me to work in. But, you've been part of some incredibly historical events, news events, and you had to kind of put on a newsman's hat, right?
Well, yeah, you have to be ready when you're at your job, and when things happen, you've got to be able to respond. Didn't even write about it, but I was with Bob Costas. We were in the earthquake in 1989 at the Giants and the A's World Series.
Yeah,
next to each other.
It's going to be in volume 2 of the book, I think.
Well, no, but I mean, we weren't on the air. We were doing whatever we were doing, reporting on the series, but it was on another network.
Mm-hmm.
But so those folks got thrust into a news circumstance, and that's what you do. When I was at the Olympics and Dick Ebersol came to me, and the Olympic bomb goes off, you're thrust into that. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what you do, because it's happening in front of you and you're on the air. And so, you stand out there all night and you do the same thing that you would do in sports. You ask the police, you ask the authorities, you ascertain the most information you can. You try and figure out what the circumstance is, and if there's peril and just whatever it is. So you just do it. I mean, I didn't anticipate that, a man would bite off another man's ear. I didn't anticipate that Ron Artest was going to go into the stands, and have the Malice at the Palace. You don't anticipate a lot of things that happen in front of you,
Yeah.
but you have to be able to react, and you have to be flexible enough to understand that there's no script in any of this.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no script in life. Okay, so don't act like you can't be rigid and have a format and all of this other. It just doesn't occur like that in sports. And that's why so many people who are in sports who've been thrust into news. Look at Bob Costas and what how he handles whatever comes in front of him at the Olympics, or Jerry Sandusky, or boom, 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 Koppel, Carson, Costas. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, think, react. All right. And there are some others who do the job great too, who are our colleagues and our friends, and have storied careers. But that's what it calls for.
Yeah.
It calls for being ready.
Yeah. Well, you and I share that experience too, the 96 bombing. I was covering that Olympics, and I happened to be in the House of Blues at that time, in the House of Blues, music going on. And then people came running in, and it was a chaotic scene. It was crazy. And then we went outside, and then the police had already cordoned off all of that area in front of the CNN building, which is where we were staying. I couldn't even get back to the hotel. Honestly, I had to wait like hours until they let us, and we had to prove with credentials that we can get back to the hotel. That was a scary night, man. And you were there in Centennial Park. You talk about how Fran was not happy, your wife, that you're out there in the middle of this like potential war zone, right? And
well, we didn't know that there'd be another bomb.
Yeah,
Nobody.
of course.
Yeah, she wasn't too thrilled that I just didn't get out of there. And what are you going into that for? Let's get out of
it, man. You got to do it. Yeah.
Well, Dick Ebersol entrusted me to get the information. Fran worked for the Olympic Committee. We lived in Atlanta, so I had access to the authorities at the organizing committee. I had access to the police because I had done a lot of the, police athletic leagues and so forth, the sheriff department banquets for their youth outreach. So, and I was a familiar face who they would cooperate with. So I was able to ascertain the information. Plus, my position with NBC, also, helped, advance the credibility. Being with that entity during the Olympics. So, it was the right place to be for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, what a time that was. But let's go to a lighter note here. Let's talk about the Dream Team. And I wasn't aware that you were at the greatest game never seen, or whatever it was called, the great practice in Monte Carlo, that you were one of the few people. I mean, I wasn't allowed in that practice, and you were in it. And I had seen the guys practice, but I wasn't.
You were the official photographer, and you weren't there, huh?
They kicked us all out, and I had seen other practices, but I didn't see that one. And it's legendary. And of course, our good friend Jack McCallum somehow got a hold of the tape, and he was able to write about it.
That was Chuck's guy who taped it.
Yeah. What was his name? Pete, right?
Pete Stoy.
Great. Yeah. And it must have been a joy not to have to work, that you're just a guest to Chuck Daly. You're hanging around the Dream Team. It's like, and that brings me
golf and hang out and go to the games and enjoyed myself. And I was sitting at that practice with Tom McGrath.
Yeah. I remember Tom.
Tom, the executive director, or was he one of the up in the upper echelon of USA basketball.
Right.
And Chuck came over and said, "Pay attention! You're not going to see anything like this. Pay attention."
Yeah. And what about
how he could speak? It wasn't, it wasn't mean or anything. Was, pay attention.
Right.
So
right.
Like, okay, I won't blink. and I'm glad I didn't.
Well, I mean, Chuck was just first of all, the perfect coach for that team, right? I mean, hands down. But the three things I'll always remember that he said, 1, he'll never call a timeout. 2, he'll never get out of his chair. And 3, he'll never miss a tea time.
And he upheld all of them, even though that last game he almost had to call a timeout.
He almost did. Yeah.
He decided, well, I'm not going to ruin this record. And he says, by the way, I understand my position. I got the at least 11 of the greatest players in the history of the game.
Yeah.
And Leitner, college player. He said, really, I'm going to call timeout and start telling them what to do and how to do it.
Right. Yeah. But he knew how to. how to massage these guys' egos, how to get them to buy in, about the USA on the chest and all that, and all the peripheral shenanigans going on with Barkley. You and I think you and I were together one of those nights that he went down the Rambla at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, what?
We had so much fun. Remember that?
What an experience,
It was
man.
like the Pied Piper too. Remember the trail that he left? I mean,
Yes.
everybody.
Yeah.
It was all. I mean, it was almost like one of those scenes of, not to the same degree.
Yeah.
But it was Ali-esque in Sasha.
Yeah.
Charles just had everybody following, and everybody was singing and clapping, and what a scene. But I remember something that Chuck said. Chuck brought the best out in people. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He said to me one time that, we were doing the games at a station in Philadelphia, Prism, and he was my partner at the pregame and halftime. My first job outside of Colorado, doing the Sixers games. And one of the guys was talking in my ear, and I was young, and they were screaming, and not necessarily at me, but just barking all, and it was distracting, And I took the thing out, and he said, "What's wrong?" And he said, I said, "Chuck, this is bugging me. I can't, you can't." He said, "Forget about it. Ignore it." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "It's like I am with players. Okay. I only accentuate what they're best at, and everything I don't like, I disregard. I try and not even point it out to them." I said, "Well, how do you do that? Why is that?" He said, "Because when I talk about what they like and what they're best at, it motivates them. When I tell them what they can't do, it just pisses them off, and it's going to irritate me even more because I know they can't do it. So take the best of everybody and accentuate it, and try and disregard the rest." You would call it selective hearing.
Yeah.
And so I never forgot that. And, when he became the dream team coach, and he had all of those egos and all of those, he says, "I've got 12 CEOs. They're all making a heck of a lot more money than me. They're more famous than me. They're more everything than me. And I've got to figure out how to keep them all happy with playing time." He said, "But that's the one thing, even on my team, whether it was the Pistons or the Nets or wherever he was coaching," he said, "the one thing I have that they can't control, that's playing time."
Yeah.
So that's how I get back. I don't like when somebody's doing something or they don't want to cooperate with the group. They don't play as much, and they get the message pretty quick because they all want to play.
Yeah. Very true, man. Well, I read a quote in your book that some boss, that former boss you had at NBC, gave you the nickname Zelig, right? And I don't know who that was, but it's in your book. And you were described as Zelig, that you were everywhere, right? Zelig being.
That was an article that was written.
Okay,
written.
got it. So somebody described you as Zelig. So you and my dad have that in common. Okay, I don't know if you met my dad. He was into a lot of things with me. I used to bring him
a long time ago.
Yeah, I used to bring him to fights, and he would sit behind me. And when I read the chapter about your dad, Jerry, and my dad, Lenny, I mean, I was tearing up because there was so many similarities about bonding over sports. And then once we became, successful in sports, bringing our dad sort of, as a payback. And you talk about bringing your dad to the Masters year after year after year, and how everyone knew who he was. My dad loved that. He loved going to all-star games. He was with me with the dream team. I mean, Chuck Daly couldn't have been nicer to him, and he got the nickname Zelig because literally every picture I took, he happened to be in, There's a very famous picture, and I'm going to post it with this interview, where we went up to the palace, to Prince Renier's, the palace in Monte Carlo. Had a state dinner. My dad came, and he needed to be in every shot. I mean, I have a shot of Michael and Magic sort of, at the bar.
I got to go to the practice, but I didn't get to go to the palace.
That was amazing.
I got left behind on that one, but
sometime over dinner, I'll tell you a couple of stories from that experience. Oh my God, that was crazy. But
I think they all liked Prince Albert. They all thought that he was a fun guy.
He was great. In fact, it was his idea because he was a sports fan. He went to Amherst College. In fact, he went to Amherst the same time I went to UMass. We were the same age. He was a big NBA fan, and he's got the greatest NBA players in history, staying down the street at the Lowe's Hotel. Let's have a state dinner,
I remember I met him.
Yeah.
On that trip, but I met him. He carried in the flag for his country at the Winter Olympics. I can't remember exactly was it Albertville or Lillehammer, one of those two. He carried in the flag, and I met him. They were 2 years apart.
Yeah.
So I don't
Amazing.
remember if it was before the Dream Team or after, but he seemed like just a regular guy for being a Royal.
Yeah, I mean, that was a night that I'll never forget for sure. But it was amazing. But the point I'm trying to make, Jim, is that our dads played a huge part in our lives, right? As kids, I mean, I was a diehard Rangers fan, Mets fan growing up, and I think I got into sports photography because I wasn't ever going to play sports, even varsity or anything like that. But I love sports. I wanted to still have that bonding with my dad. And then photography was my other love. So I just kind of married the two of them. And then if I could give back to him, when I was starting to travel and do things, it was great. And the memories you have of you and your dad, I mean, it's amazing at the Masters and all the other things you did together. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, he was my best friend.
Yeah.
And, I had older brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was growing up in Denver, they were so much older that by the time I was really able to recognize and function, as an older kid,
yeah,
they were gone. So they were off to college and, doing what they do and enjoying themselves and, advancing themselves and becoming adults. So I ended up spending a lot of time with my mom and dad. And my dad would take me, whenever he wasn't working, he would take me with him to a Bronco game, to a Nugget game or a Rocket game, or we would go play tennis or whatever it was.
Yeah.
When he was a workaholic. He was very dedicated to his business and to his clients and so forth. So, but then as I became older and had gotten into this profession, third or fourth year that I worked the Masters, I said, Dad, you ought to come here. You'd really enjoy this. Mm-hmm. And so Frank Cherkinian, who worked at CBS, got my dad a credential, and he ended up keeping score for me on the tower that year. And then it just became a 20 plus year run and tradition. And he would go, and we would, we'd stay in the same home. We'd ride in the same car. Mm-hmm. We'd eat every meal together. We'd walk the course together. He'd sit up on the tower. So we were basically with each other, 18 waking hours a day for that week. But that was the only week of the year that we would spend together. Mm-hmm. We'd see him on Thanksgiving. And then when I got married to Fran, obviously, we'd see him on special holidays, mm-hmm. birthdays and occasions. But, that was a day here or 2 days there. So that ability to be able to spend all that time with him at that place. And Augusta National is a spectacular place. It's a national park. It's pristine. It's beautiful. There's not a blade of grass out of place. There's the beauty of all the azaleas and the dogwoods and the magnolias, and just, and then you've got the greatest golfers in the world participating all the time. Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, whoever it was, Tom Watson, Ben Crenshaw, Tiger Woods, and so on and so forth. Fallville. And so then we had that, and Ernie Els. And so then we had that in the mix, and it just became something that we would look forward to every year, and just that time together. So it was just a special time, and a time to be with, your best friend and your mentor, and, the guy that you just looked up to and loved. I really, I had some great mentors along the way, but I really only wanted to be my dad and Floyd Little when I was a kid. Okay? Yeah. And I wore number 44, and, I didn't want to be a fireman.
That's funny. Yeah.
I wanted to be my dad.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be Floyd Little.
Yeah. I can relate. I wanted to be my dad, and I wanted to be Bud Harrelson.
There you go.
I wore number 3 all through Little League. I could totally relate. And I got to thank you for sharing that in the book, because it's just so important, and I got a lot out of it, and it was wonderful. So that's the next to last chapter. The last chapter is I'm not writing another book. Yes.
I am not writing another book.
Right. Well, Jim, the last thing I want to talk about, because I know we got to wrap this up, is about the great late Kobe Bryant, who we both loved very much, and we saw from the beginning. I mean, you knew him literally from the beginning, from San Diego, when you were, and this is another thing I didn't know, that you were a scout for San Diego. Who knew? But you met him when Joe Jellybean was playing for the San Diego Clippers. This kid,
the Sixers. Right? I was at Philadelphia, and then before that, he was in San Diego. So I had seen Kobe was an infant in Pam's arms, and
Amazing. Yeah.
to see that whole growth. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you're not close to anybody when they're a child. You say hello to them in the hallway, or or you pat them on the head, and you
Yeah.
high five them, or you watch them shoot a basket, and you smile and you laugh. And there's a recognition, but there's no, it's not like I was hanging out at Joe's house, or
Right. Yeah.
but you'd see him in the arena, and see
Mhm.
him with Paul Silas, and then you just followed him, and saw what he became,
Mhm.
and then when he got to Los Angeles, and I was working for NBC,
Mhm.
he had obviously known, he made the connection again,
Yeah.
and had that recognition. Kobe was very smart. I mean, Kobe, as a real young kid,
Mhm.
was way ahead of it. I
Mm.
mean, he always said he didn't go to college. Guess why he didn't go to college?
You didn't need to.
That's exactly right. He didn't have to.
Right.
All right. The guy knew
Exactly.
how many languages? Three
Yeah.
or four,
Crazy.
maybe four.
Yep.
And he was just so mature beyond beyond his years, and he
Mhm.
was wise, and he was dedicated and diligent to what he wanted to do, and
Mhm.
um, there was a lot of life's lessons in him. Obviously, Kobe wasn't the perfect guy.
Mhm.
He had quirks and flaws, and he could be difficult. I mean, you know that.
Mhm.
How often did you see that?
Yeah, well, I knew, I just knew when I got that side eye or whatever it was.
Well, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, but guess what?
Yeah.
That has to occur.
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay, that has to occur. And by the way, that was this of all of this.
Mhm.
Okay, it
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
so. But I mean, he he was just a special guy, and he was a very loyal guy. That's what I always loved about Kobe.
Mhm.
He was loyal.
Yeah.
I mean, he went out of his way to help others. Thousands of acts of kindness that he didn't want acknowledgement or recognition for. And if you were a friend, you didn't have to ask. He did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you had a great quote about him in the book. You said you described him and as how he would like to be remembered, in your eyes. You said, quote, as a talented overachiever, blessed with talent, but worked as if he had none. I mean, constantly working, constantly striving for greatness beyond greatness. Amazing, right?
That was the last interview that he ever did in a Laker uniform. He let me do the last because I was, I have a photo, and it's in the book,
Mm-hmm.
the Talking to Goats book. Yeah, there's a photo that's in the last, taken by Andy Bernstein.
Yes, in like not even a hallway. It was like a doorway
Right. That's the
between.
last. Right.
Yes, right before
He
the
had
interview.
finished his press conference,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
did one other interview, and then
Yeah.
he intentionally. You see, this is how thoughtful he was.
Yep.
He said, "You're going to be the last in my uniform. You were the first."
Mm.
Now, I think Chick Hearn
Yeah.
also did one of the first interviews, or
Yeah.
the first interview. I'm not, I don't have that exactly chronicled, but anyway, he signed the photo from the first to the last. Love you, brother. Kobe 24, and that was your photo.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
John Black's a little bit off on the side.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have it. It's like you have it in a
Super wide angle because we were
beautiful circle. I mean, it's almost
6
like a
inches away from
spotlight
each
on
other.
him.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was amazing. Jim, have you ever been to a press conference ever for an athlete or a coach where the entire media section stood up and gave a standing ovation to the person? I mean,
Yes,
I was blown away that every single person in that room, and there were a couple of hundred people covering that last game, all stood up in unison and gave him a standing ovation. I mean, it's still getting chills thinking about it.
that
Amazing.
was beautiful. That was
Yeah.
beautiful. I have seen that though. I've seen
Yeah.
that a couple of times. David Robinson.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
David
Okay.
Robinson. He was a
Yeah.
beautiful guy too, and treated
Well,
everybody so well.
Jim, we've got so much more to talk about, but I love you, man. I know that your time and promoting this book, which I absolutely love, and we're going to promote it the hell out of it on our social media. I absolutely love it. Talking to goats, and congrats, man, on the Kurt Gowdy Award. Talk about like full circle. I mean, Kurt Gowdy, who you listened to and watched, from Wyoming when you growing up in Denver, you're getting his award at the delayed, but you will get it, the Hall of Fame ceremony, I guess in May, right? It's going to be.
Yes,
So,
if the pandemic is
yeah.
in some semblance of dying down or under
I
control.
hope. Well, I'll be there because I'll cheer you on, man.
Well, it's a great honor, and I'm so thankful to Jerry Colangelo and John DeLeve and the voters, and you've
Yeah.
had that experience, and so
Yeah.
it's a wonderful feeling. And,
yeah.
to go with Kobe's group, to
Oh.
go with that class with 2020
Mm-hmm.
is really special. And
Yeah.
Andy, you've been great. You have documented my life. And if you look in this book, there are pictures that have been taken by Andy Bernstein in the Talking to Goats book. And like I said from the beginning, you've been at a lot of the very great moments of my life, and I'm grateful to you. I appreciate you. I have tremendous respect for you, and I consider you a dear friend. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, Jim. And all that right back at you, man. I'm so blessed and so grateful that we just happened to cross paths and over and over and over again to establish a great relationship. I love you and Fran dearly, and best of luck with the book, man. I mean, everything I'm seeing and reading and all the accolades for the book have just been fantastic. So keep it going.
Thank you. Let's do it again, Andy.
All right, buddy. Yeah, of course. Got to do it again.
Let's do it again. And good luck with the LA Times and all of your success. And
thanks, Jim.
Yeah. I'm told to just keep talking. You keep clicking.
I keep shooting, man. As long as they're playing, I'm going to keep shooting.
By the way, has there been a better photo than that one you've got of LeBron? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's iconic. And if that man doesn't thank you for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Now he created the image. I understand. Yeah. But you had to be there to capture it at the exact right instance, because that is this. That is Jerry West. That is Johnny United.
Thank you.
That is it.
Well, that was, and it came, 2 weeks after the tragic accident with Kobe, and it just, the whole thing was just surreal. And that picture kind of took on a life of its own, but I'm thrilled that he liked it. Yeah.
What does LeBron think of that photo?
He actually loved it, and he called it out the next night when on social media, it just went crazy after the game. And, the guy's got 60 million or whatever followers. So, it was pretty cool. And one of the only times, Jim, in my entire career where I actually made a print, which I do all the time for guys since my rookie year, I've been giving prints out, but I actually asked for a signed print because I have like 4 or 5 hanging here in my office. And that's one of them. And he was very gracious, and I was very appreciative. So, yeah.
Well, there you go.
All right, man.
He should be asking you to sign that for him.
Yeah, well, maybe that day will come. I don't know.
It will. It will. He's a gracious guy. He's a humble guy.
He is, for sure. And, you got to think about a volume 2, Jim. I mean, this new generation of goats, you got to keep thinking about that. So
leave that for the next guy to chronicle.
Well, I'll be with you wherever you are, man. So great to see you, and all the best. Happy holidays coming up. And, I'll see you somewhere after this crazy pandemic is over.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
All right, pal. Take care, man. I could have gone forever talking to Jim about his amazing career, all the GOATs, all the interviews, all the backstories. Man, I guess we're going to have him back next season to give us some more insight. But I really want to thank Jim for taking the time, and good luck, man. This is a fantastic book, Talking to Goats. I really wish him the best of luck. Everybody should get this book. Got a sports fan in your life? Got to get this book for the holidays or afterwards, a birthday, doesn't matter. You got to read this book. Also, congrats to Jim on his upcoming Basketball Hall of Fame award. I will definitely be there to cheer you on, my friend. I want to thank Jim's wife, Fran, my dear friend, for helping to set up this interview. And as always, my researcher and producer, Veronica Ahn, for getting me ready for this episode, as always. Thanks, everyone, for continuing to download and subscribe to our podcast. A reminder that you can find us on the LA Times app and online, as well as your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Please keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, Twitter at Legends_of_Sport, our blog, legendsofsport.blog, and our TikTok and YouTube channel, Legends of Sport. You can find my photography on Instagram at ADB Photo Inc. So thanks, everyone. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a very special episode. That's all I'm going to say right now, but it is definitely a very special episode, very near and dear to my heart. So please keep checking our social media for that announcement. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and as always, remember, you got to wear your mask. Take care, everybody.